Jason, first and foremost, appreciate a couple moments. Hope you had a good holiday, my friend. How are things?
I'm great. Likewise.
Good. Thanks. All right, let's get into it because the hot topic issue is Chip Kelly and the state of the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm not even going to ask you about the game itself. I just want to ask you the future in your eyes when it comes to Chip Kelly. Is he over his head as GM along with being the head coach? Is it just too much on his plate right now?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that he knows personnel well enough, and I think that he believes that his system is superior to personnel. And the key thing in the NFL has always been understand that you do what your personnel allows you to do and do it as well as you possibly can. But the personnel dictates what you do, not vice versa. And
that's a clear-cut indictment on him, as we talked about, because, again, he's a guy that wanted the keys to the car. And right now, you look at some of the moves that he's made in the offseason, you look at the draft picks, a lot of stuff hasn't panned out. Go back to some of the moves that he's made in that offseason. I'm just wondering, did that kind of raise a lot of eyebrows among NFL pundits and media and GMs around the league, where you're getting rid of really talented players, albeit maybe you're getting rid of them because of their personality and they just didn't buy into what he was looking to do?
Well, I think that Chip's explanation has always been about that it was money-oriented, which I understand. You have to manage the salary cap, and you can't necessarily keep two wide receivers when they're going to make $7, $8, $10 million a year, whatever the number is for Deshaun Jackson and Macklin. I get that, but it doesn't mean you get rid of both of them. you pick one. I get that you want to run downhill football,
yep,
and you want to have ball control. That doesn't mean that DeMarco Murray is a really good fit for your system. You still have to have a one-cut runner. And guys like LaShawn McCoy and Deshaun Jackson and Jeremy Macklin, and again, I'm not saying you keep them all.
Sure.
Frankly, I'm not a Deshaun Jackson fan, so I appreciate his one skill that he has.
Stretching the field.
But I can understand getting rid of him because he's difficult to manage, and you don't necessarily know that he's going to play hard game after game, year after year. So I get that. I get getting rid of him, especially when the cost is really too high. But that doesn't mean you get rid of all of them. It doesn't mean you get rid of McCoy and Macklin and Jackson. That's not sensible to me. You have to have those guys because those guys impact your games in ways much more important than your X's and O's can possibly draw them up. I mean, I watched Mike Martz go through the same thing with his X's and O's. He thought the X's and O's he could draw up were better than whatever the personnel going against him. And it was fine when you had Kurt Warner and Marshall Faulk. It wasn't so good when you had Alex Smith and Vernon Davis, as rookie players and young players. It just didn't equate. So to me, that's the problem I have with Chip Kelly. The other thing that I just keep looking at is the mirage that is Chip Kelly. Like 10 years ago, Chip Kelly was coaching at the University of New Hampshire.
Yep. Yes, he was.
And all of a sudden, in the span of less than 10 years, he's become a guy who's so expert in football that he can run both the personnel and the play-calling responsibilities and all the organizational things that go with an NFL team. And that's the one, like, there are a bunch of steps in the... And look, I think Chip's a really smart guy. I mean, he knows his football. He's done his research. He's done his homework. He's learned his craft as much as you can learn it from the books that you read and the amount of studying you can do. But there's a whole different level of managing personalities and handling organizations that you have to learn through years and years of experience. It's the old 10,000-hour rule that you have to have so much experience. It's not 10,000 as a number that you can actually equate to football, but it's a life experience that goes with, again, handling athletes and knowing the difference between a college environment and especially a small college environment and an NFL team where you're dealing with men, not boys.
And listen, you're preaching to the choir, my friend. I've been harping and singing that tune for the last year plus now and going into this season, because the one thing I look at Chip Kelly as a guy, he is smart, no doubt about it, but there's also book smart and street smart and knowing how to read players and talent and people and personality. And I look at a guy who comes off very arrogant, is very smug, especially when they're winning. When you do that when you're losing, that doesn't sit well with a lot of people. And it's certainly, I don't care who you are, it's not going to sit well with an owner in Jeffrey Lurie. Here's a guy that bought the team in 94 when he was 42, and now he's in his 60s, and they still haven't won a Super Bowl. So we can slice it and dice it any way we want. I guess the question is, Jeffrey Lurie is the one that gave him all this control. You would think Jeffrey Lurie at the end of the season can sit down and also say, I'm the one taking it back. If that happens, if that scenario plays out, forget about what he's owed as far as a contract. Is there a scenario, if that plays out, that you can see Chip Kelly saying, you know what, forget it. I want control. I'm going back to college. Or find another head coach.
Absolutely. I mean, look, there's a lot of money to be made as a college head coach. I'm sure that USC, depending on who the person is that they hire, is going to have the kind of money to pay $5, $6, $7, maybe even $8 million a year if they want to. They can pay whatever the price they want to pay at USC. If the Texas job somehow opens up, which I don't think it will, unless there's some amicable divorce between Charlie Strong and the University of Texas, Texas will pay whatever it takes. There's going to be a couple of universities. There's a lot of money flowing around college football right now. I think in the SEC, each one of those teams is getting distributions of like $31 or $32 million for the TV money from the SEC network. So there's plenty of money to be made at that level if he chooses to go that way. And I think that Chip's made more for dealing with college kids and who, they're kids and they have to be under his control and do what he says. And they're only going to be there for 3 or 4 years at best. And so they're basically shuffled out of the system pretty quickly before they get tired of his BS. And every coach has some level of BS.
Sure.
Some just hide it better than others.
Sure.
And Chip doesn't really hide it very well because he doesn't want to have a connection with his players. And at some level, and I'm not saying it has to be. You don't have to be friendly. You don't have to be like buddy. But there has to be some kind of human connection between you and your players, where they can relate to you somehow, some way, and know that they're in this together with you.
Yeah, and you're right. You talk about coaches having to deal with it. I mean, there are guys like Jason Garrett that when you take a position with the Dallas Cowboys as head coach, there's going to be perks, but there's other things that you're going to have to deal with along the way, good, bad, or indifferent. Before we move on to the rest of the NFL, give me one scenario that you would see playing out that at the end of the year you say, you know what, this guy's as good as gone, and he's taking a college job. Chip Kelly. How would it play out in your eyes? What would be the only scenario where Chip Kelly, they finish 6-10, it's beyond unraveling, they're just getting blown out left and right?
Anything. Look, you just continue on your path you're going. I mean, they may win out of the last 5 games. They may win 1 or 2 of those games. I mean, I haven't taken a really good look at the schedule. But barring a 4-1 or a 5-0, finish to the season, I don't see him coming back and being particularly happy in this situation. They're regressing. You've got players who don't fit in your system. Every one of his free agent moves this last offseason can be questioned. His trades, the signing of the cornerback.
Maxwell.
Forget Maxwell. Because nobody's even talking about that one as much because DeMarco Murray's been such a colossal flop in that offense. Okay,
that's true.
But Maxwell is not a number 1 corner, and you overpaid for a guy. You paid number 1 money for a guy who should be making $6 or $7 million a year at tops as a pretty good number 2. But they paid him like a number 1, and then they gave away a guy in Macklin who's a number 1 receiver. Maybe not top of the league, but he's somewhere in that area of 10th to 20 best receiver. But he's a number 1 guy, and in that offense can drive things. And they don't have a number 1 who can drive things right now. And we haven't even gotten to what's the solution at quarterback.
Well, that's the question every week after a loss. I mean, he knew going in that Sam Bradford was damaged goods, and you also know at the end of the day, Mark Sanchez is going to throw the ill-advised pick. So you can keep doing the same thing and expect a different result, and that's insanity. I haven't really looked too hard at the quarterbacks in college, but the bottom line is if they go in with these two under center or competing next year, guess what? It's 6-10 all over. I've seen enough from these two to realize they're not a franchise quarterback going forward for the Eagles, especially in this quote system.
Sanchez is a fine backup, and Bradford, if his career arc had been different and he hadn't gotten hurt in so much, maybe he'd have developed into a much better player than he is. I mean, I see the upside potential in Sam Bradford, but there's only so long that you can wait for it to show up, and it hasn't shown up, unfortunately. He's a great guy, nice kid, talented player, but he's been racked with injuries.
Yep.
So at the end of the day, what are you doing at quarterback? And you got Goff out there, you got Paxton Lynch out there, you've got Connor Cook out there. Are any of those guys fits for what Chip wants to do? To me, Paxton Lynch looks like another version of Nick Foles. Maybe he's a little bit more talented than Nick Foles, but it's the same basic concept. And so you're going to hitch your wagon to that. I mean, if you're Jeff Lurie, if you're doing that route, you're basically saying, I'm sticking with Chip for another 2 to 3 years. Because if he's the guy picking the quarterback, that's the guy who should be finishing it off, trying to make sure that quarterback is good enough. And that takes a minimum of 2 to 3 years to figure out if that's the right choice. And I don't see Chip sticking around for this. I just don't. I don't see him putting up with it. I don't see him dealing with the NFL life. I don't see him dealing with the athletes. It's not what he's about.
All right, again, a couple minutes with Jason Cole, Bleacher Report. Rich Quinones here. All right, let's move on. Yesterday we saw Carolina dismantle an overmatched Dallas team. And, a lot of people, I get a lot of feedback on the Carolina Panthers. And, hey, look, their record is what it is. Cam Newton's playing very good football. And you're probably going to think I'm crazy on this one. I look at Carolina, and I guess it's maybe the bias when you look at Carolina. I don't see them as a dominant, undefeated team. I don't see them as a dominant team that can really represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. I mean, tell me, what am I missing here? I know they got a great defense.
You're missing it, yeah, but you're missing a defense that travels.
Yeah.
You're missing a defense. I mean, and because look, we're in an era where people don't appreciate defense, especially during the regular season, because the game is not geared for it. Okay, but this is a really special defense, especially in pass coverage. Now, if they go up against somebody who's a really rugged running team, maybe they don't quite match up perfectly. But when they're playing coverage with Kuechly and Norman and some of the other guys that they have, they're really that's really a nice team.
Yeah.
I mean, and they can come up and they can hit. They're really efficient on third down. And what they do is they get into a lot of 3 and outs, and they develop a lot of field position that plays very nicely with what they're trying to do on offense. Because Newton, and I know people look at the numbers and they don't appreciate how good he is, but he's playing really good situational football.
Yes, he's playing smart football. Yep.
Playing very, very smart football, even if the numbers don't represent it. And what I look at is I see a John Elway in the first 10 years of his career where he kept carrying those Denver teams to Super Bowl after Super Bowl after Super Bowl, with the difference being that they've got better players on defense. They're playing with better than Carl Mecklenburg. They're playing with Luke Kuechly, who's a better. They're playing with better corner play and defensive backs. They've got a Josh Norman out there. So, I just think that this is a better version of those teams. So I think they'll be representative in a Super Bowl situation. And if they play coverage against a team like New England or against the Cincinnati, I think that's a really good matchup for them. 2 more quickies. Appreciate the time as always. Brock Osweiler will get his second start with the Denver Broncos, and they get set to take on, you just mentioned the aforementioned New England Patriots. If this kid plays well and they beat the New England Patriots, have we seen the last of Peyton Manning under center for the Denver Broncos? Well, I think it's a touch-and-go situation. Okay, I think that all things being equal, yes, we have seen the last of Peyton Manning, because I think that the judgment in the eyes of the people who run the Broncos organization, from what I've been told, is They've got a championship caliber defense, which is absolutely true. That might be the best defense in the league when they're going right. Okay, they're certainly right there with Carolina and some of the other teams that we've talked about. Arizona is very good too. So you've got a championship caliber defense. Don't have the offense get in the way. Don't commit a lot of turnovers. The one thing that you've got with Peyton is, he's going to turn the ball over at this point in time.
Yeah.
I mean, how many more games do you have to go through with him throwing an interception or getting hit in the backfield and fumbling? That it's again your comment about insanity. It's doing the same thing over and over again. So that's why I think they'll play safe with Osweiler. The one problem is Osweiler has a resume of one game. So what is he? Is he going to regress? And is he going to regress quickly? We'll have to see. If he starts bottoming out and he goes 2 or 3 games throwing 2-3 interceptions, then it's like, okay, is Peyton ready? And that's the part we haven't seen play out.
Last one before I let you get out of here. When you look at the Cincinnati Bengals, and everyone's waiting for the other shoe to drop, and you kind of saw Dalton take a couple steps back here and there. But this is a team where it's Marvin Lewis, it's Andy Dalton. They're joined at the hip. Is this year different from past Bengals failures? Is this a team that could make a deep run into the playoffs?
Do you keep saying Bengals, or do you say Bengals?
Bengals. I'm a New York guy. Bengals.
Okay, because it sounds like Bengals, which is good.
Where are you from, Jason? Where are you from?
I'm from California.
That's why you have that smooth demeanor, West Coast.
Right.
Not me. I'm all over the place. Cincinnati. We'll call him Cincy. I give it right back at you.
I believe in the Bengals.
Give it right back at you, West Coast time.
I know. That was good. I like that. Do I believe in the Bengals?
Yeah, Cincinnati.
Yeah, I believe in them because I think they have Tyler Eifert. The problem is they're going to do in prime time what they've done the last couple of weeks. They're going to not show up in critical situations. Like, I'm sorry, you have to beat Houston at home on a Monday night game.
I agree. And that again,
you can screw up a game once in a while.
Sure.
But I get that. But you got to beat that team. And Tyler Eifert, you can't drop 3 balls in that game. And Andy Dalton, you can't miss on those fade passes down the right-hand side. And A.J. Green, you have to make that catch. Their 3 biggest components on offense came up short in that game, all right? But they are deep. Like, we just talked about those 3 guys. You throw in Marvin Jones, Mohamed Sanu. They're 2 running backs. And Hill and Giovanni Bernard are better than any 2 running backs that you can name from the combination of teams of Denver, New England, Pittsburgh with Le'Veon Bell hurt, Indianapolis. Well, yeah, they're better than Gore right now. I would take those 2 guys ahead of anybody on pretty much any team in the AFC that I can think of off the top of my head right now.
Listen, at the end of the day, it's measured by playoff wins, and it always either falls on Andy Dalton or Marvin Lewis, whether it's fair or not to get it done. But you're right. I mean, they're a deep team. They could make some noise. All right, listen, I know you're West Coast time. You're just kind of lollygagging out there on the West Coast enjoying the weather.
I live in the East Coast. I'm from the West Coast. Don't do that to me, Rich. I've been 25 years.
I know you have, pal. You know why I like you?
I have the acknowledgement of East Coast anxiety. Okay. I get it.
We just sit back and we relax. That's all we do. A little feisty.
Oh yeah. Like my wife and I, my first wife and I, we went to get cookies at the shop down in South Florida. We've been living in the East Coast for about a week. We expected it was 9 o'clock at night. We expected them to just hand us the rest of the cookies because they were about to close. The guy turns and goes, "Oh no, not another one." That's East Coast. Okay, that's the East Coast. On the West Coast, it's like, hey, take all the cookies.
That's right. Take all you want.
The other one was like he wanted to throw them at us.
Bars closing. You hang around. You're not tipping, but you're going to sit.
Get out the door. Get out the door now.
All right.
You got to go home.
Hey, always good catching up, my friend. I appreciate the time.
Be good.
You got it. Jason Cole from Bleacher Report. Good stuff. Always giving it to me. Good stuff from Jason Cole. Great comments and quotes, by the way.